For section 3.4, we're looking at the equations of lines, and we're going to use this equation y equals mx plus b. The number that comes with the m, we're going to call it slope, and the one that comes after the plus, so the b in this case, we're going to call it y-intercept. This equation, so once again, let me highlight, the slope is m, so that's my slope, and then my b, as you guys can see here, it is my y-intercept. Since we see a slope and then we see an intercept, we're going to call this the slope-intercept form. So for the first part, in my example 1, identify the slope and the y-intercept of each equation. For my example A, my slope is -4. So once again, we're going to say m is -4. That's my slope. My y-intercept, I'm using 1. So my y-intercept is 0, 1. Notice that for the x value, I'm using 0. And then for the y value, I'm using that numbered with the sign included, so +1. Let's take a look at my example B. My slope is +1, right? Is the numbered with the x. And my y-intercept is going to be 0, -8. Looking at my example C, my slope is 6. It is the number with the x. Now my y-intercept, I know I have to use 0 for the x. I don't see a value after 6x. I don't see a y-intercept. So I'm going to say that that is a 0. So my y-intercept is 0, 0. Lastly, from example D, my slope is 1/4. Now my y-intercept is the point 0, -3/4. You guys might be wondering, well, why are we using the m for slope? The thing is that the slope tells us how to move. So that's why we're using the m for move. For the y-intercept, later on, once we graph, that b, that y-intercept, is going to tell us where to begin. So that's why we use move and begin. That's where the m and the b come from. Now, for example, find an equation of the line with the slope 2/3 and the y-intercept 0, -1. Since my slope is 2/3, my equation of the line is going to start with y equals, I'm going to look at the slope value, 2/3x. Remember, it's the number that comes with the x. And then for my y-intercept, I'm looking at -1, so -1. Once again, the y-intercept, the x value should be 0. Now graph using the slope and y-intercept. So I told you guys that the slope was m because it tells us how to move. The y-intercept was b earlier because it tells us where to begin. So I'm going to start with my point 0, -1. That gives me this point, right? I'm going to begin with my y-intercept. Once again, we call it y-intercept because it's the point where it crosses the y-axis. Now on the moving, my slope is 2/3. The top number, I mentioned before, on the slope, the top number tells us up or down. You know, positive if it goes up, negative if it goes down. So by looking at my slope, it says go up 2. Now the number at the bottom tells us right or left. We move to the right if it's positive. We move to the left if it's negative. So this one telling me 2 to the right. So I have 2 up and 3 to the right. So from the point where we started, I'm going to move 2 up and 3 to the right, and that gives me another point of the line. Now I'm just going to connect my points the best that we can, and that's my line. That's my line, y equals 2/3 x minus 1. Once again, I started with the y-intercept, so I begin there, and my slope tells me how to move. Graph using the slope and the y-intercept. One of the things that we had on the previous example is that the y was by itself. Y equals such and such thing. Now here, we don't have the y by itself. So I'm going to get the y by itself. So move the 3x to the other side. Obviously, switch the side. So I have the -4y equals, since the 8 and -3x are not like terms, because none of them, it's not like both of them have an x. So I'm going to have to write both of them. So I'm going to write negative 3x plus 8. Once again, I want the y by itself. So let me divide everything by negative 4. Let me divide everything by negative 4. So that becomes positive 1. 1y equals negative divided by negative, that is 3 over 4x. 8 divided by negative 4, that means negative 2. So I have my y-intercept is negative 2. So on the y-axis, I'm going to go negative 2. Now, my slope, it tells me 3 up and 4 to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 up and 4 to the right. And then connect your points. Now, let's write an equation without the graph. It's just we want to graph it. We're going to write the equation in slope-intercept form of the line given. The slope is 4, and it has to pass through the point 2, 5. So we know part of this of the line. The line is y equals 4x because we know the slope. I just don't know my y-intercept because the x value is not 0. So so far I only know half of my answer. Now let's solve for the other half. What I'm going to use, I'm going to use this point, but I'm going to use the formula I've been using, y equals mx plus b. It's just that I'm going to use 4 for m, because that's my slope. I'm going to use 2 for the x and 5 for the y. I don't have my b because I don't have my y-intercept. So when I rewrite this equation, instead of y, I'm going to write 5. Instead of m, I'm going to write 4. Instead of x, I'm going to write 2 plus b. Once again, I'm solving for b. Let me do this multiplication first. 4 times 2. So I have that 5 is equal to 8 plus b. Since I want to have b by itself, let me move the 8 to the left. So I get that negative 3 is equal to b. Now that I have this, I have my b, I can complete my slope-intercept form. Once again, earlier I said we had half of the answer, y equals 4x, and I'm going to complete it with minus 3. That's my equation of the line. Once I give you the slope, you have half of the answer. You need to figure out the other half, which in this case was the y-intercept. Let's take a look at another example. Find an equation of a line through the points negative 2, 5 and the point 3, 4, and give the final answer in slope-intercept form. As we notice, I don't have a slope, but we learned in previous sections how to figure out the slope having 2 points. So I'm going to go the second y minus the first y. So 4 minus 5 equals the second x minus the first x, which is 3 minus a negative 2. I know 4 minus 5 is negative 1. 3 minus a negative 2, I see 2 negative signs that basically becomes a plus. So at the bottom I have a 5. So my slope is negative 1 over 5. So I already have half of my answer. Y equals negative 1, 5x. And then I don't have my y-intercept. I'm going to use any of these 2 points. It doesn't matter. When I give you 2 points, whenever you guys are solving for the equations of the line, it doesn't matter which point you choose. Just to choose one, I'm going to choose the point 3, 4. Once again, that's my x value, that's my y value. So I'm going to rewrite the equation y equals mx plus b. Instead of y, I'm going to write 4. Instead of m, I'm going to write negative 1/5. Instead of x, I'm going to write 3, and then plus b. I'm going to do this multiplication. So I have that 4 is equal to negative 3/5 plus b. So I'm going to move this to the right to the left as plus 3/5. I notice that I have a fraction in a whole number. So it's easier to make them both into fractions. 4, I want to make it into fraction, but I want a 5 at the bottom because I want the same denominator. So for me to figure the number on the top, I'm just going to multiply 5 and 4. 5 times 4 gives me 20. So if you notice, 20 over 5, that's the same thing as 4. I just wrote, once again, I wrote forward as a fraction because it's easy to deal with them. I end up getting, when I combine these fractions, I end up getting that b is 23 over 5. So I'm ready to complete my equation. I'm going to write plus 23 over 5. Before I move on, once again, 4 was a whole number, was an integer in this case, so I moved it as a fraction, right? I can do that. The only thing that I wanted to do, the reason why I moved it into a fraction, because I wanted the same denominator, in this case 5. And we know when we add fractions, we copy the denominator, 5, and we just add the numerators. Okay, now let's move on to the next example. Write an equation in slope-intercept form of the line through the point -3, 6 that satisfies the given condition. So I have the line 2x plus 3y equals 6, and it has to be parallel to it. When I see parallel or the word perpendicular, I'm interested more than anything of the slope of the line. And I know we're going to see the slope of the line when the y is by itself. So let me write 2x plus 3y equals 6. I'm going to move the 2x to the right. So I have that 3y is equal to negative 2x plus 6. Divide everything by 3. So I get that y equals negative 2/3 x plus 2. Once again, this equation I solved for y, so I could see the slope. In this case, the slope is negative 2 over 3. So now, for this one, when it says parallel, it means it makes sure it has the same slope. So to begin with, I already have half of my line. I have y equals negative 2 over 3x because it has to have the same slope. Now I need to find my y-intercept, but remember, I know my slope and I know a point where it goes through. So I'm going to remember the equation y equals mx plus b. Instead of y, I'm going to write 6. Instead of my m for slope, I'm going to write negative 2 over 3. Instead of x, let me write negative 3 plus b. Let me do this multiplication. So I have 6 equals. Let me do this multiplication. Negative 2/3 times negative 3 gives me positive 2 plus b. So we can agree that b is equal to 4. So I can finish my equation. Y equals negative 2/3 x plus 4. Once again, when it says parallel, make sure you have the same slope of the line. Now, when it says perpendicular, if you notice, it's the same line, right? 2x plus 3y equals 6. I'm not going to do the whole work again. I know the slope of this line is negative 2/3. However, when it says perpendicular, I want my line to be y equals, the slope is going to be the opposite sign. So instead of negative, I'm going to write positive, and then the reciprocal of that. So the slope that I want is positive 3 over 2x. Change the sign and do the reciprocal of your number. All right, so I have my slope. I just had to complete my statement. So I'm going to come and write my formula y equals mx plus b. Instead of y, because I'm using the same point, instead of y, I'm going to write 6. Instead of m, I'm going to write 3 over 2. Instead of x, I'm going to write negative 3 plus b. I'm going to do the multiplication. 3 over 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 9 over 2. So I have 6 equals negative 9 over 2 plus b. Once again, all I did was the multiplication. I'm going to move this over as a plus 9 over 2. So since I'm dealing with fractions, let's make the 6 into a 2 at the bottom. And for the top, remember, I'm going to multiply these two numbers. 2 times 6, that's 12. Once again, 12 over 2 is 6. I just wrote my 6 as a fraction. So my b, I have to combine this. 12 over 2 plus 9 over 2. I know it has a 2 at the bottom. 12 plus 9 is 21. So my b is 21 over 2. So I'm going to complete my statement. Y equals 3 over 2x plus 21 over 2. Once again, once we have an equation of a line, once we have the slope, if it says parallel, use the same slope. If it says perpendicular, switch the sign. So I change it to positive, and then do the reciprocal. So what that means is if the slope originally, the first equation, the slope was positive, on perpendicular, your slope will be negative, and then once again, do the reciprocal. Now find an equation of the line through the point negative 3, 3 that satisfies the given condition. The line has a slope of 0. So if we started with y equals 0x, because it has the slope is 0, and then plus b. The nice thing of 0, the important thing of 0, is that this thing is going to go away. So it's just going to be y equals something, right? Y equals a number. I know my point here, this is my x, this is my y, so I don't have to do much work. I know it's going to go, the value of y is going to be 3, positive 3. I'm just going to call this y equals 3. That's the equation of the line, right? Any line that has a slope of 0, it's y equals something. I remember I covered back in section 3.2, there were two special cases when y was something, it was a horizontal line where the slope was 0, and then there was a vertical line, that was when x was by itself, x equals something, and it says the line is undefined, so that means when we don't have a slope, when it is undefined, that means x equals something. So I'm going to go here at x equals, looking at my point, I know the x value is negative 3, so that's my equation.